4:30 a.m., February 15th, 2021. I was driving home from a friend's apartment in a snowstorm. Woke up super early and had the itch to leave, and being that I did not want to get snowed in. So it's 4 a.m., and I'm in downtown Indianapolis. Nobody's out, except for plows. I don't see any homeless nothing. I live on the eastern side of the city, and for those not familiar, it's urban, but not as any metropolitan. I'm driving very slow, of course, and very, very sober, I might add. So, as I come to this crossing, I see this wolf-coyote creature prance, almost bounce along into this thin alley, nestled between a coffee shop and a gas station. Here is where things get weird. Within seconds, I'm obviously passing the alley, driving slow, and looking for the animal. I do live on the outskirts of the city, and I do encounter some rather cool animals from time to time. So, I'm going like 10 to 15 miles an hour, super slow, to see if I can see it or any tracks. I peer into the alley to see a literal man, mind you. No human is out right now. It's terribly cold and snowing. Sure, homelessness is a huge problem, but I know what I saw. And all within a couple of seconds, I saw a larger dog, wolf, coyote type creature prance into this alley, only to drive by and see a very large figure of what appeared to be a man. The weirdest part were his arms were of rather unusual length, like they were forming upwards. I can't make this up. He was almost stomping along down this tiny alleyway away from me. No animal in sight, and the figure clearly wasn't concerned about a wolf, dog, coyote creature like that would have been. Literally, appeared with long stick-like arms that almost looked like they were droopy. Some of the most trippy stuff I've ever seen. I know what I saw, and it was not normal. All a silhouette. It was very, very strange. The Navajo Reservation is the largest res in the U.S. It goes into New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, and Arizona. This story takes place in the northeastern region of Arizona, near Indian Wells. This was told by people from around that area. If you are heading west on State Highway 15, out towards Dilkin, you come to a stretch of road that goes onto a small valley. I remember going down this road in my youth. If you looked at the horizon, it would seem as if the road kept going, and then suddenly, your car would be pulled down by gravity as you followed the road. It would always give me butterflies when we would go down the slope. When I heard the story about this road, it made my stomach feel different. A man was driving home one night, and it was very late. It was a drive that he had done before, so he wasn't too bothered by it. When you are driving on the res, sometimes there isn't any way to keep cattle from getting on the road. No fences means that you need to be extra aware. I was always told to look for the black horse. If you see a black horse, then you'll be able to see anything else that may wander into the path of your vehicle. So, this man is driving home, not paying too much attention. He drives down the slope, but when he gets to the bottom of the valley, he sees it, but doesn't have enough time to react. Suddenly, a horse comes out of the darkness. He slams on his brakes, but he is unable to stop and hits this horse with his truck. The impact was not enough to deploy the airbags, but the man was tossed around quite a bit by the incident. He turns on his emergency lights, gets out of the car to assess damage. The front of the car was crumpled, and one of the headlights clearly destroyed. He cursed out loud. This was the worst place to have an accident, and he did not have signal to phone for help. He then remembered the horse. The man went into the cab of his truck, got a small keychain flashlight. He then started shining around, looking for the wounded animal. He heard noises, but they did not sound like a horse. He was positive that he did hit a horse. As he approached the sounds, he could see the animal's fur moving from its ragged breathing. As he got closer, he began to realize what it was. There was a naked elderly woman, wrapped in a large pelt. She was moaning from pain. The man stopped dead in his tracks and got weak from fear. He stumbled back to his truck, and although it did suffer plenty of damage, he was able to get it started and drove off. Once he was able to get signal, he properly called the authorities. An ambulance drove out there and recovered the woman. She was driven to a local health care facility. Due to the fact that many of the healthcare staff were Navajo, nobody wanted to even touch the woman. The woman was apparently known in the community. She was thought to be bedridden. This was shocking because she was so far from home, and the state she was in was immensely off-putting. She still had on her attire when she arrived at the hospital. The nurses called for her family to come. When her family got there, they removed her pelt and her jewelry. The staff were very frightened, but there were some non-Navajo staff that still provided her with care. The elderly woman had only bumps and scrapes. Other than that, she seemed just fine. She was able to get up and walk around the same evening. She went home with her family that same night, but after a couple of days, she passed away. In Navajo culture, if you find out who a Skinwalker is, you have the power to destroy them. After the community around Indian Wells found out who, or more fittingly, what this woman was, it was for certain that her time was at an end. Okay, so I'll start off by mentioning, I live in Oregon. Not quite a rural town, but our town is small, and only about a 10-minute drive to what you would actually consider a rural town or area. Everyone's heard about the cryptids and lore of Oregon woods. Personally, I hate these woods. They're just vast and terrifying, but at the same time tempting and beckoning almost. I stay out of the woods. I don't hunt or fish, and I might go hiking once every couple of years with friends, but I make it a point to not go where I don't feel safe. I kind of brushed off all the stories about the woods here, until I had an experience of my own, and I'm ready to share with what I saw that night. My friend and I were graveyard shift at a local bakery, and so because of that, we always carpool. She picks me up at about 11:30 p.m. The bakery itself is in a more rural area, but the main road in town takes us almost all the way out there. It's a pretty well-lit road until you get slightly out of town, and since it's the main road through town, even at night, there's usually passing cars or people walking. From my house, it takes about 10 minutes to get to work, using this exact road. For about 3 months, this road was being repaved. We'd have to stop literally right before the turn into the bakery to wait for construction crew so they could finish whatever project they were doing. After 2 nights of being stopped right outside of work for well over an hour, an estimated date of construction being done being 3 months out, we decided to start taking the back roads. The back way to work was on the opposite side of town of this main road. It took us all the way out of town, around the outskirts, and finally to the bakery, for a total of about 30 minutes travel time, instead of just 10. This back road was completely surrounded by heavy woods. There was a private drive to a house every 5 miles or so. No streetlights and no passing cars. No pedestrians even. This road was also extremely curvy. Just constant twists and turns. As expected, we'd see a lot of deer, and the occasional possum, squirrel, etc. But this particular night, we began our journey through the back roads, just as we had been all week. We got about 10 miles through when my friend went around this bend, and suddenly, slamming on her brakes, I was on my phone, so I was not looking up when she first saw it. I look up, and right in front of the car is this gigantic buck. I'm talking huge. Not moose-sized, but definitely one of the largest bucks I'd ever seen. He was staring directly at us through the windshield. We were just kind of frozen there for a moment for some reason. We both looked down at the feet of the deer, and in between its front and feet was a dead raccoon. It was clearly a raccoon. Its face was even pointed toward us. Ringlets on the tail. Basically a stereotypical raccoon. Except this thing was also huge. Now the buck was large, but large bucks aren't unheard of. This raccoon was the size of a huge dog. Like, think of a mastiff. We looked back up at the deer, and it was still staring right at us. Like it was making eye contact with us both. My friend flashes her high beams and honks the horn, and hoping to scare it off successfully. It does not run off. Without breaking eye contact with us, it starts to walk toward the car, slowly. We both are freaked out at this point, and my friend throws the car in reverse, backs up, swerving around the deer. This entire time it moves its head to make sure it can keep eye contact as we back up, pull to the side, and drive away. We look back behind us, and this thing is just standing in the road, staring at us as we drive away. We finally went around a curve and lost sight of it, but until then, it never stopped staring right at us. We talk about this a lot, and how weird it was. I didn't think deer ate meat. I mean, I'm not a deer expert. I just assumed they were herbivores. So the standing over that dead raccoon was the most unsettling part, even over the constant eye contact. Luckily, we weren't dumb enough to get out of the car, but I always wonder what would have happened if we did. Since then, I've been more aware of the lore around here. I've heard unsettling noises and screams coming from the woods, but this was the only actual encounter I think I've had. Am I thinking too much into this, or is it a little weird to anybody else? There's so many legends and stories of cryptids around here, and I'm sure you've all read about the messed up stuff that happens at Crater Lake. Just thought this might be an interesting encounter for somebody to hear, since nobody really believes us. But it's hard to believe something you never saw with your own eyes. Went camping on a lake, and once it was in the middle of the night, pitch black in a field on the bank of the lake. My friend pointed out that there were glowing eyes staring towards us in the distance. This, of course, got my attention, and I assumed it was a deer at first. But the way it was staring at us, not taking its eyes off of us, started to give us a creepy feeling, as at the time we were cooking and eating food. The eyes were glowing bright, but there was no light, even by it, or pointing towards it. I have been hunting, and have shot and seen deer in the darker evening, but never remember seeing their eyes ever glow. I know deer eyes glow, but I didn't think they glowed in pitch black darkness. So, we decided to try to approach it with flashlights while stomping and yelling, just to try and scare it, or possibly get movement confirmation. But the eyes just stayed in place and did not react, which began to freak us out. So we backed up without ever being able to make out a body. we decided to start going back to what we were doing, while every now and then keeping an eye on the eyes. No one seemed to notice the eyes ever getting farther away or seeing them leave, but at one point, we all noticed they were just gone, like nothing, and we never heard any sort of footsteps or hopping away, as if maybe a deer had trotted off. We kinda wrote this off as a deer, but I always questioned because of the feeling we all got during the experience and the odd behavior. And then, I looked into Skinwalkers recently, realized they are from the Native American past stories, and my friend who was with me has a lot of Native blood in him. He is Native to the point to where if you saw him and his features, it would make sense. He even has a card for his tribe. What made me post this story is that exact reason. Also, finding out that it is said that Skinwalkers transform into animals. Their eyes stay human, but also apparently glow. After looking up glowing deer eyes, I was even more freaked out, because the eyes I remember seeing did not seem to be that far apart, and even seemed like they were completely forward-facing, and not sideways-facing like deer. Maybe it was a curious deer in shock when we tried to spook it, and maybe it couldn't see us well. Once we ignored it a bit more, we just never caught it walking away until it was far enough to run without us hearing it. What we saw, and what we thought about, not knowing the behavior and the appearance of what a skinwalker is supposed to be, and comparing it to the experience I had with my native friend, is clearly freaking me out and giving me goosebumps. I'm getting chills coming to this realization, and goosebumps as I write this. What do you have to say, or what are you thinking of this? I am almost convinced I may have had a supernatural experience.